Hi, welcome to the bathtub. It is I, the old masturbator, and or as they call me in China, Pao Zhao Jiao Shou. Call me bathtub professor. And we're here with another episode of this pointless and stupid show. It's brought to us by our unpaying sponsors. We're the only show on the YouTube with that sponsors. They don't pay us anything. I never even met these people. But bookshop.org and betterworlds.com for those who feel like buying books from people who aren't horrible. And as soon as they turn horrible, then you've got to go somewhere else. And of course, you all know Akba by now. Amazon and the Washington Post can kiss my ass. That's another one of our sponsors. Today we're gonna get straight to it with our Mountain Spring sugar-free cranberry juice. Sugar-free cranberry juice, carb-free. This is a carb. You've heard of carbon neutral. This is carb neutral. We never just heard of carb unless we buy someone else's carb credit. So we have used no carbs in the production of this video. We're carb neutral. Philip K. Dick, puttering about in a small world, small land. I think I'm going to call this episode the Philip K. Dick who might have been. I like Philip K. Dick. I grew up reading a lot of his science fiction over the years. I particularly, when I was younger, liked his short stories, and I like some of his novels a lot. He was not wasn't at the top of my favorite SF writers, but he was someone I always found interesting. We've talked about him, and we're reading through him in the past 7 or 8 years of this stupid show. Today we're talking about this is non-SF novel. It was published in 1885, after Dick died. I think Dick died in the early 80s. And what has been known about Philip K. Dick is that he started off writing a lot of kind of science fiction, potboilers, ace doubles, lots of short stories for the magazines. And he also wrote at one point, sometime in the 50s, he decided he wanted to write non-SF. He wanted to write realistic fiction about people he knew and lived with, largely in California, because he was mostly a Californian. He was born in Denver or somewhere, but he spent most of his life in most of his productive life in California. And he wanted to write about those people, and he wrote I want to say 6 or 8 non-SF novels, which stayed in his drawer because no one would publish them. And you'll see, if you read the ones I've read of his non-SF novels, many passages and many ideas and many characters show up in the science fiction novels that come later. I remember there's a guy's a tire regroover in one of the non-SF novels. I think that profession shows up. And a lot of these kind of Joe Blow working guys with crappy jobs and bad marriages show up in the science fiction, the later science fiction. Anyway, I've read a few of the Philip K. Dick non-SF novels. Years ago I read Confessions of a Crap Artist, and I think on this stupid show we talked about Marion the Giant. He wrote them very quickly. I think they may just be first draft novels. And then they say, like I said, they stayed in the drawer for decades until his estate kind of dug them out and published them. And I had some of them were lost, so several were lost and never found. And I had never really heard anything about Puttering About in a Small Land. I think this is one of the later novels, non-SF novels that was published. I like this cool old Paladin, UK Paladin trade paperback edition. And I wanted to try it. I was thinking about reading a new one of his SF novels, or rereading something. And I thought, well, I haven't read this. And I thought, what the heck, I want to try it. Because I'm not dying to read Philip K. Dick's non-SF novels. And yet I started this, and I really, really enjoyed it. This is one of the best novels Philip K. Dick ever wrote, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know how well it's regarded by Philip K. Dick fans, because we don't pay any attention to what's going on in the world, as we should, except what's in the newspapers. That's enough. But Puttering About in a Small Land is, I can't even speak that clearly. Puttering about in a small land should be a tongue twister. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. Puttering about in a small land is excellent stuff. I couldn't put it down. I really enjoyed reading it. He writes about 50s in suburban America and California. And I don't know anyone else who writes about that. I think partly the subject is interesting. The central characters, and again, I never remember their names, Virginia and Roger Lindahl, they start off in, are they in Washington, D.C.? I think they're in Washington, D.C., and then the East Coast. Or maybe I guess it's from the East Coast. I don't remember. I could have sworn it was from the East Coast. So it just says Washington here. They move to L.A. Somewhere in the course of the book, but it starts off in Los Angeles, and it starts off with this couple in their 30s, I would say. I think they have a child or two, and they're going up to Ojai to find a school, a private school for their son, who's for some reason unhappy. I don't remember now, but they take him up there, and the first 20 or 30 pages is about going to this school up in Ojai. Ojai's, we've talked a little bit about it. It's kind of fascinating history. And it has a lot of theosophists went there, and they had some alternative education. They don't mention the theosophists in this per se, but it's a sort of progressive school that they take the kid to. And it's about the mother taking the kid up and the father taking them up. And in the course of the opening chapters, we learn that Roger runs a TV. He sells televisions, a retail television and repair shop somewhere in are they in Los Angeles? In Los Angeles. Again, in the 50s, so it's a totally different landscape than we know now. And they've been there. He's doing pretty well, and they want to kind of put this kid in this school. And we learn a little bit about them, and then they meet another couple in the course of the first 50 pages. And the first 50 pages are a bit wandering. We cut back and forth in time, which I normally find kind of annoying. But the one thing that comes through from the first 50 pages is that Roger, who's the central character, like many of Philip K. Dick's central characters, is a man who's never been quite satisfied, never quite happy with the life he lives, and never quite happy in the marriages he's in. He's always got a roving eye. And he moves around a lot. And we're in the middle of pretty much his second marriage, his second job at fatherhood. They're almost always serial fathers. And we learn about them, and they meet this other couple. And we get the picture of people living in that world. And I just found the book really, really absorbing, particularly in the kind of unvarnished, the unglamorous picture of this kind of glamorous, warm place. I don't think I'll say any much more than that. I really enjoyed it. And if you get a chance, if you like Philip K. Dick, or if you like particularly like his non-SF novels, this is the one I would recommend probably reading. This is probably my favorite book of his in many ways. I read a couple of passages. He does some really good jobs with these characters, and the characters are quite interesting. I want to talk. There's a Mrs. Alt. The only writer I can think of that reminds me a little bit, and he's nowhere near the prose writer that Richard Yates is, but it reminds me a little bit of Richard Yates and Richard Yates' vision of these types of families. He doesn't write as beautifully as Yates does, but he has the same sympathy and affection for the characters, even the awful ones. Mrs. Alt reminds me of that real estate agent in Revolutionary Road, the horrible woman. And she's kind of a nice lady. She's the principal of the school. And this is the first time she talks about one of the other characters who becomes a principal character. His name's Liz Bonner. And she's the woman of the couple, another couple that the central character, Roger, has an affair with. And she says about how Roger upset her. "You certainly upset Liz Bonner," she said. "She flew out of here, but she gets like that. She has an infinite capacity for misunderstanding what people say to her. She gets everything wrong, and nobody can ever straighten her out. She's one of those sweet, earnest people who hang on to every word, and then God knows what goes on in their brains." We've all met these people. I've never heard them describe this well before, if any. For example, we have to keep special toothpaste here for her two boys because she read somewhere that the regular toothpaste, the big brands, has diatomaceous earth in it, and that wears away the teeth. I don't think they've used diatomaceous earth in toothpaste since the 20s. Maybe they do, though. Maybe she's right. That's the trouble. There's no way you can prove she's wrong. She's sort of a Mrs. Alt search for the word. I don't want to say lunatic. That isn't it. She's sort of an idiot with a touch of mysticism. It's really lovely. In the Middle Ages, she'd probably have been burned at the stake, and sometime long afterwards canonized. The picture, when you first hear about Liz, she sounds very fascinating, but she gets better. She's even a better character as you move along. I want a little passage here about California. I love California, and I love books written about California. And this gives us a good picture of the world. He comes from another place, and California is seen through his eyes. The weather in California was warm. There was no snow, no icy streets, cars with chains, children wearing knickers and wool socks, or old men puffing along in overcoats and earmuffs. The sight of palm trees entranced her. It seemed to her, they're talking about the wife, Virginia, entranced her. It seemed to her like another country entirely, even another continent. The aircraft plants had become the center of all activity. Nothing else mattered. Workers' cars were parked in lots as far as the eye could see. The plants never closed. As soon as one shift ended, another began, day after day. The swing shift, the graveyard shift, the regular day shift. Men and women flowed into and out of the plants, carrying their lunch pails, the men wearing jeans, the women wearing slacks and bandanas. To Virginia, they looked tired and quarrelsome, and she saw fights break out on street corners and in cafes and bars and even on the public buses. The workers put in long hours, made more money than they could count or keep or even remember. They were tired, growing rich. Most of them had come from the Middle West, lived in cramped rooms with children, yelling under the windows as they tried to sleep. Again, another really lovely passage about coming to California for this prosperity and the exhaustion of acquiring that prosperity. There's so many passages I really enjoyed. I wanted to read out loud. I think there's a wonderful passage when he's angry and he thinks everybody's a crook. And there's some wonderful passages about Liz, who is one of my favorite characters in a realistic novel, and her kind of her glowing feeling about life and her kind of crazy. She runs around. She doesn't wear underpants, and the men in her life are constantly getting angry at her because she doesn't wear a bra. She's a wonderful character. Anyway, there's Puttering About in a Small Land. I won't say much more than that. I have to say I really enjoyed almost every passage of it. And I would recommend it to those of you who like Philip K. Dick or like good kind of realistic novels about America in the 50s. California in the 50s. Stay safe. No carbs. It's a carb. What do they call it? We're carb neutral. We're always going to be carb neutral. Bye.